No reira hoki mai anō e hoa mā, ko tau anō mai tātou ki runga i te maunga o whare pūhunga, ki te aha ki te kōrero ki ngā tikanga whakawhānau, pēpi whakawhānau, tamariki, ngā mahi o māma o pāpā, o te whānau, ko Teaonui ahau e whakarongo mai nei, ki aku mā reikura, ki ngā puti anō, no roto i a tātou o Raukawa, engari tēnā whakarongo mai ra ki tēnei pūnua pāho, kei a tātou, tēnā kōrua kei a...
Tēnā tātou e te iwi. Ko te Rauhiringa Brown tōku ingoa, huri tēnei, no tēnei he nui, Ngāti Maniapoto, Ngāti Apakura, he uri hoki ahau no Ngāti Raukawa, ki whare pūhunga. Tēnā koe.
Kia tiki natu ko ngā kōrero. Hine i āhua i te pō uri tama i apua i te pō tangotango, whakarongo rā kōpū mai ki kauwhautia tō ahunga, ki tō ieretia tō taketakenga. Kua ua kōrero te ahine, e tino whai wāhi ana, e tino hāngai ana ki tō tātou kōrero i te wānei, especially when we look at traditional parenting practices. I really love the idea that it's one, in our audio we look at tama and hine, and that who better to talk to these practices than a koe. So before we actually carry on, tēnā whakamohio te atu ki te iwi ko wai koe, e tō whai wāhi, tō hononga ki tēnei kaupapa o te, o ngā mahi o te kōpū.
Oi, tēnā koe. Ai, he mokopuna anō tēnei no Raukawa, no tūrongo raua ko Mahinārangi, he mokopuna o Ngāti Huri, Ngāti Wehi hoki, ko Piki Tūrawa ko Ukaipo ngā marae, ko Naomi tōku ingoa, he māma tēnei, koe rā te kaupapa nui, te kaupapa matua nōku, e toru aku tamariki, 15, 8 and 2. And he kairanga hau tēnei, so i roto i taku akoranga i te whare wānanga, ko tōku tino kaupapa miharo rawa atu ko te mana wahine, ngā kaupapa e pāna ki te mana wahine. Mō tōku tuhinga roa, my PhD was looking at Māori whānau experiences of pregnancy and childbirth. And really that piece of work and the kōrero that I had with whānau, te Rauhiringa, nearly 14, 15 years ago, that piece of work was the catalyst for me to really want to understand how do we support whānau to experience pregnancy and childbirth and parenting in a way that celebrates te whare tangata, that upholds te mana me te tapu o te whare tangata, and that really supports our whānau for it to be a really beautiful, empowering experience, because actually in that kaupapa rangahau, a lot of the stories were about harm, they were about trauma, they were about searching for things. So this was 15 years ago, and it was, whānau were ka kohi i ngā mea paku, they'd find little bits of crumbs of kōrero, and then they would try and put that together in their own experiences and their own journeys. So, from then, a lot of my mahi has been, well, there's got to be something somewhere, like kei whiara, has been searching for those different pieces of mātauranga, those tikanga, and trying to understand what that means for us now. How do we put it into practice, not just, searching for searching's sake.
Marama.
Yeah, maki te pātai tatahi?
Mau te pātai tatahi tahine.
Ana. Tēnā koe, kei taku iho pūmanawa, kei te whehea?
Pai.
Kei te pai.
Kei te pai.
Tēnei mea, te whakarauora i ngā tikanga whakawhānau pepe. E ai, kia tātou, te iwi Māori, ia pēr e te hiwera tikanga me ki?
Ai, pātai pai tira. Mahara watu ngā tikanga e pāna ki te whakawhānau pepe. Nā te mea, ko te whare tangata, te katoa o tātou ao. Whare tangata is, it's everything.
It is.
And so it's only tika, it's only right that we had heaps of tikanga, we had heaps of mātauranga e pāna ki te kōpū, e pāna ki te whare tangata, e pāna ki te whakawhānau pepe. It was a really sacred time. It is a really sacred time in our worlds, not just for mama, not just for that physical whare tangata, but for, you know, our babies coming into the world, our papa, our waira whānau, ko te katoa. So, yeah, it's only right, e tika nā mahara watu ngā tikanga. But it is a process of reclamation and refinding and understanding kaha mātou i tēnei ao hurihuri. Like, what does that look and feel like for our whānau at their different stages of their journey through pregnancy and then through childbirth as well. So, yeah, there's heaps. Where do I start?
I know exactly where to start.
Okay,
right back at this part. And but when we look at burying whenua, does it have anything to do with, you know, what is the significance, I guess, of the place where we bury our whenua, especially if we're people who harvest the whenua for kai, for sustenance and things like that? Like, we're looking at, I think it's a bit of a cyclical nature of things, you know, and how ngā tauira o āuranga hau e whakātua ana i tērā huri tahotanga, taua korokoro meki.
He pātai pai tērā. So I haven't looked specifically at practices around, you know, kakainga i te whenua. Engari, I know that there is like quite a diverse range of practices around where whānau bury their whenua. And, you know, ko te tikanga o te whenua ki te whenua is that our whenua, when our babies are kei roto i te kōpū, kei roto i te whare tangata, ko te whenua, te mea ka whāngai i te pepe. So that's what gives our babies their nourishment. That's what feeds them for that 9 months, you know, iwa marama. And then when we return the whenua ki te whenua, it's that recognition then that we're feeding papa tuanuku, who will then sustain our babies when they're outside of the womb. That's, you know, part of my understanding of that tikanga is that we then feed that back to papa tuanuku and then that cycle continues. She continues to feed us. But lots of whānau will bury their whenua in different places. Some of that is, you know, our different hapu have different tikanga. I know some whānau will bury their whenua in the urupa with their nannies. Others have a separate area that's not in the urupa, so they keep that separate again. Others have a rākau. Others have a whole kind of ngāhere where you take a tree and you bury it. And then there are other whānau that I spoke with who still don't know yet. And so they put their whenua in a pot plant and they keep it with them until they've figured out that journey of where that should go. There is some kōrero tukuiho that sometimes it would go in a certain kind of boundary line between mama and papa, depending on their various whakapapa. So I don't think it's a one size fits all. And I think, you know, kia nei, ko te mea nui, ka whakahoki te whenua ki te whenua. So it's not sitting in your freezer, which is a story that's come out lots and lots and lots, but that actually it goes into, you know, te one tapu.
Marama, tēnā koe.
Ia o mātou ki kahotia, o ki Ngāti Maniapoto, one of our kuia there, Nani Mangu, she said, bury Pepe's whenua in the urupa. And I ahua o horereo, because I hadn't heard it before. And I was like, oh, okay. But it was a bit of a hike too, because our urupa is at the back up the top of maunga. And ia mātou, i te wai timata mātou ki te kaki, te rā maunga, I heke tua. And what was interesting is that right next to our wharenui is a whenua tree. And so she said, oh, well, he was meant to be buried, his whenua was meant to be buried at the rākau. And I said, oh, ka whai tēnā. But I always wondered too, if your whenua was buried in that urupa, then are you committed to going back to that urupa?
Koina.
I te wā, ka mate koe. Aua, kare te mōhio. But no, that's what we did. Yeah, we have a tree in Otorohanga. And I'm curious to know what was the driving force behind your desire to want to collate that data, because you know, what you're saying is there wasn't a lot of rangahau. There wasn't a lot of literature around this kaupapa for whānau Māori, but what was it for you that really drove you, that enticed you to want to study and research that kaupapa?
Two things. I was hapu at the time. And do you know, one of the things was when you're hapu, you're sorry, I keep looking over at our beautiful mama over there who's hapu, because I'm like, she's doing the mahi. But when you're hapu, there's a lot your body's going through. Your tinana is going through massive transformation, like the most amazing transformations. You're growing a whole nother human being, sometimes more than one human being. And so the added work that I saw, the wahine that I was talking to, the added labour that they were going through, trying to also reclaim a whole lot of mātauranga and tikanga, it was both joyful and tiring at the same time, because their bodies were going through all of this stuff. They were still mahi, they were still, some of them had other tamariki. So for me, having spaces where actually that knowledge is more accessible, not just to mama, but to whānau, so that it's not just mum carrying the weight of reclamation, that actually it's all of us, it's all our jobs. So she doesn't have to learn the ori. She can, but she doesn't have to, because dad has, or koro has, or auntie has, And so that for me was a driving force. How do we make this kōrero accessible to whānau? But then the other driving force, I think, was it just transforms how we see ourselves as wahine. When we think about whare tangata versus uterus or womb, right, there's a whole nother āhuatanga ki roto I era kupu.
Well, he whakapapa anō kei awa kupu, And it looks so bigger than just, anatomy, physiology and things like that.
Yeah. So when you're connected into that, te whakapapa mai hine ahuone, like there's a power in that compared to just someone talking about your uterus or your placenta. He mana tō te kupu, I roto I te kupu, I roto I te reo Māori, te whare tangata, ko te kōpū, te whakapapa o era kupu, ko te kupu whenua, whenua ki te whenua, tērā tikanga, just there's nothing like it.
And what was there, before you conducted your research and, found your driving force, what access did you have to mātauranga about these things that would have helped you prepare for, the coming of your mātāmua?
I was, to be honest, I was a book learnt. Like I learnt through puka. I learnt through reading. We didn't grow up at home at the marae, so it was all head knowledge, like it was all stuff. And stuff I was like, wanted more of, like was really hungry for, but it wasn't, I didn't know it, tinana, maybe knew it, wairua, but I didn't feel it. And so that was kind of one of the driving forces, was actually how do we understand and learn these kinds of things with each other in spaces where you feel it. You feel it in your whare tangata, you feel it wairua, you feel it collectively, so it's not also like an individual thing. I think that's the other piece for me, that it's not just one person going on that journey.
Yeah, and when you talk about those kupu and the whakapapa of those kupu and just the whakaro Māori when it comes to te whare tangata, because I remember growing up, kōrero around ikura and just your wahinetanga, if you will, was somewhat, there was stigma attached to some of those things. They were made to be kept secret or quiet. And what I'm seeing now is wahine a lot more empowered to embrace, and that the kupu and the whakapapa of those kupu and the pūrākau that comes with those kupu are really beautiful and something to be celebrated, that we are the givers of life. And I love that your rangahau and the message that you share with wahine encapsulates all of that. What were some of the highlights, if you will, of your rangahau when you went to speak to this whānau, to that whānau, to those midwives and practitioners that were on a mission to reclaim and revitalise some of these practices?
Yeah. The highlights were, one of the highlights was just seeing the passion that whānau had to try and find this kōrero. Ahakoa, kei te kōrero reo Māori, kare rānei, whether they had the kupu for it, they felt it. They knew there was something more to understanding hapūtanga and, te mahi whakawhānau pipi, and their willingness to just try, to get what they could and to try. and to use what they had. So at that time it was, reclamation of ipu whenua. That was quite I wouldn't say new thing, but it was something that whānau were just starting to kind of pick up on. And so, seeing all of the really different ways that whānau made ipu whenua. So some made out of uku, some made out of whare, some whānau who are just, I think one of the whānau said, we're a no-frills whānau, just straight in, kei roto i te whenua, no ipu, like whenua ki te whenua. And, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, well, hea te tikanga? Hea te tikanga e pāna ki te whenua. And one of the things I always say is, well, a ia whānau, a ia hapu, a ia iwi, ngā tikanga. There's so many diverse ways to practice these amazing things that all have that power, that mana, that tapu associated. So who am I, who's done one piece of research, a couple of pieces of research now, but, to say, well, this is what it is. And actually, my rangahau is all about saying, how do we support whānau to find those pathways for themselves, not this is what it is.
Yeah, how do you empower whānau to start asking those questions for themselves?
Yeah, and I think the loss of that knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, but colonisation, Tohunga Suppression Act, played a huge role in whether it was hiding that or the eradication or just the preservation of some of that mātauranga, because tohunga were the ones that delivered the babies and held a lot of that mātauranga.
Yeah. And, kia nei, it was stolen. There was deliberate actions to try and suppress that knowledge, because when you see how powerful it is, it transforms our understandings of ourselves and our whānau. It gives our babies the very best start when they're born, when they're conceived and born in a way where you're like, whare tangata is just the ultimate, the most amazing thing, and our babies understand that. It can transform the course of their of their lives. And so that was purposeful. The connection between whenua, our land, our physical whenua, and, whenua I roto i te kōpū, cutting that practice was purposeful. It was to cut our ties to whenua. All of that was to cut our ties to whenua. But the effects of that were devastating, traumatising, devastating. And all of our whānau have, sadly, as far back as only my parents' generation, have stories of that trauma where they weren't able to take their whenua. So I think definitely, there has been deliberate actions. The Tohunga Suppression Act, the Midwives Registration Act made it illegal for our kaiwhakawhānau pepe, our tāpuhi, our tohunga, to support wahine to deliver babies unless they were trained in hospitals. So, there's been a whole lot of, and I don't want to kind of sit in that space, but it has had very real impacts on our whānau's ability to, right down to where we birth, where we feel safe birthing, who's in the room when we're birthing, how we birth, yeah.
And what's the transformation you've seen? I mean, it's only been a few short years since some of these outcomes and changes in whakaaro, but just looking around at your little circle of, over at Ngāti Huri, and even in your wider networks, what's some big transformations you've seen in terms of whakaaro around these birthing practices?
Yeah, there's been heaps. And I just, I have to acknowledge, there have been so many midwives, your mum, there's been so many kaiwhakawhānau pepe, tāpuhi, who have been, doing the actual physical supporting work of helping babies come into the world. And I always say that, I'm a researcher, I'm not, don't put me in a room to help someone birth their baby. But I will research about it and I'll interview you about it. But, here, that's a whole nother pukinga anō. But I think, they've been working in this space for a really long time to try and transform, and it might be just pockets in birthing whānau experiences. But we have in the last probably 10 years seen quite a big shift. So for some whānau that looks like having home births and reclaiming that space of home. For other whānau it doesn't, because that's not the safer space for them, or it's not the space where they feel comfortable. And so the emergence of things like birthing centre units as opposed to hospitals, or even whānau who have to go to hospital actually claiming that space. Like the willingness to take up space as Māori, to me, is probably one of the most visible things in this birthing, to have our taonga puoro in the room, to have our karakia in the room, to bring in our tupuna in the room in various ways. We're much more, I don't know what the word is, don't know if it's empowered, or we're much more confident to, and spaces are much more open to, by and large, us.
People are a lot more receptive now to these taonga.
When I talk to my kuia, my Pākehā kuia, or even my Māori nan back then, it was just quite normal to relinquish your power to the doctors because they knew better. The midwives knew better. And a lot of these were clinical or Pākehā spaces. And if you are high risk, then you will do that. But again, they, like you said, are more confident to have karakia, to ask to have muka, to here babies peto, or to take the uku whenua in. Yep. And I love when you talk at that question around transformation, when Naomi first sat down with me after I had my boy, this was just over 14 years ago, it was quite a radical thing to have my pepe at home. No one really in my circle, or my mum was a home birth midwife, so I was exposed to it a lot. It was normal in my world, but outside of that world, it was a radical thing to do. But now, everyone I know that's having a pepe, we're having a home birth. Yeah. And I'd be like, kei te aha koutou, hea e te tikanga o tō iwi. And people have a lot more knowledge than they do now that they had back then. And even myself, so our youngest is 1, and we did things with this birth that we had no idea about with our mātamu, and that was taki te whakapapa o tō pepe, tēnei mea te tua, like a naming ceremony, and more understanding around tohi. And I think just this journey of revitalisation in the space is just it's an ongoing, never-ending huarahi. Rere mehana ki a koe, ki tō momo. Ahakoa, ko koe te kairanga hau ki ngā tapuhi, ki ngā whānau, to everybody that's really keen to reclaim this, because I think we're reclaiming our reo, but, mana motuhake looks like reclaiming our tikanga and our practices and our confidence.
Ngā tahi e rā mea.
Yeah.
And I think, at the time when you are hapu, or as a whānau, you're about to have your pepe, like it's a big word, but it's a very catalysing time. Like it is a time where things come into sharp focus, like what's important, what do we want for this new life that we're bringing into the world. And so it is a time where you're like, well, how do we pack as much of the stuff in? And I remember preparing for my mātāmua, we had her at home, same thing, quite radical. But I had because I'd been researching it, I was like, right, I had this list of all this stuff we were going to do. And I think we only ended up in the birth itself, maybe did one of them. My sister had, prepared a karanga, but she was too emotional to do it when the baby was coming. But, I think there's the intention, the intention of some of these tikanga, whether we get, and I don't know, I hesitate to say this, but whether we get them exactly what we think is right at the time, or whether they're enacted in particular kinds of way, the intention that we have around preparing for that. My girl will always have that karanga that her auntie prepared, even though she didn't hear it āwaha, like it was there, āwairua. And I think those are the other elements that we bring into the birthing space.
I'll talk about that karanga a little bit. I mean, he mea hau tēnā, ki a hau, ki e tahi atu o ngā kaiwhakaronga. What, can you speak about some of those tikanga when it comes to, birthing time, or even pre-birth or post-birth, like the karanga,
Yeah, I think, again, āia whānau, āia hapu, ngā tikanga. But, one thing for us was about our pepe crossing the threshold from te pō to te ao marama. So actually acknowledging that. And one of the kuia in my rangahau talks about that process from te kore te pō te ao marama being, pivotal in terms of the creation of our ao, but then also we rebirth the world with every baby, because our babies move from te kore through te pō. So she talks about the birth canal as te pō. So when they're moving through te pō into te ao marama, and you don't ever move back through that process until, you know, the end of our life's journey. And if you do, often in birth, that's when there's complications, right? So actually having, whether it's karakia, whether it's karanga, whether it's, you know, taki whakapapa, but having those, whether it's taonga puro, those taonga to welcome, encourage our pepe into te ao marama, into this beautiful world of light that we've created for. And so I know some whānau that do it all. Like they've got all of the things going, all of the time, like it's like amazing. And then there are other whānau that might just be one little, you know, tuku karanga, little karakia. There's a beautiful karakia that my PhD's actually, the name comes from that karakia, te tuku no hine te iwa, and it was a karakia that was composed for hine te iwa, so our atua wahine, who presides over, you know, te mea whakawhānau pepe, te marama, mahiraranga, ira momo. And that karakia was composed by her uncle, I think, when she was having difficulty in her labour and birth to help pepe come down. And so, you know, we often think about it as a wairua thing, but actually it impacts our physical, you know, our ability to birth our babies in particular kinds of ways as well.
I love how you said it's the intention, right? And we look at the revitalisation of te reo Māori, and because it was at a point of near extinction, we devised, you know, like this universal reo to get it to where it needs to be before, you know, a lot of our whānau or urban whānau can start honing on our dialect and our mita. And I've found just in the space that Mum works in, that it was kind of similar with tikanga whakawhānau pepe, you know, they're asking you, what is the tikanga? And you said, it's different with this whānau and that whānau. And again, what they're capable of doing. Not everyone knows how to taki whakapapa from rangi and papa all the way down to your uri, or not everyone has access to mukahara keke or pounamu or uku whenua. So I love your kōrero around it's the intention. But I definitely felt that with my last pepe, because my tāne, he loves whakapapa and he could do that. And we heard this story, I can't remember what wānanga we were at, but I timata te tohunga taki te whakapapa o tēnei pepe wali pōhehe nuia, that was the whakapapa of that baby. And when that baby didn't come out, the tohunga clicked, this pepe belongs to another papa. And then I timata ki te taki te whakapapa o tāne ke atu mea rawake, ka puta mai te pepe. And that's how they knew, well, no whakapapa ke tēnei pepe.
I mua tonu te putanga mai o te pepe.
I mohi o te tohunga. And so I just with that story, I said to my darling, can you taki our baby's whakapapa? And he got stuck, like he was in the same spot for ages. And I looked at my tāne and I said, ko tai te wā tākina te whakapapa o tō taiwa taonga. Mea rawa ke, I ai e taki ana i te whakapapa o pepe, ka timata ia te puta mai. And I was like, wow, this is... I've never experienced this. You are the father. But no, I tino rongo I tētahi wairua rereke. So when you say it's like, it's not just it's not a spiritual thing, it's also a physical thing. And I felt the power of that tikanga, that practice, and it was the first time I'd felt that. And then when he was born, I said, he was just waiting for you to call him into the world. But my other pepe, it was his nanny, that karanga, did a karanga to call him into the world. But yeah, I think it's the intention, right? When our whānau go into the space, and what does that look like adapted in a modern society? Because we obviously can't build kohanga and have babies in the middle of the forest unless you know people that are...
Unless you have a forest too. Forest and build a kohanga.
You know, and I think that's, like, it's such an important point. Like, those tikanga are not just about us and our tinana. Like, they support our tinana and our physical ability to do what we need to do, but they also support us to reconnect to our whenua. Like, you know, koera te kaupapa nui rau atu is if you're getting muka and you want to learn how to have a mukatai, not just buy one from somebody. Like, I think that's a real risk that we start to commercialise some of these kaupapa that actually, you know, even if it's not your harakeke from your whenua, but it's from whenua, there's a process to that connects you.
Intention that's gone through
there's
that entire
intention
process.
around how you harvest, like all of those things, returning the whenua ki te whenua. The pito is another one. Not all whānau do this, but that was one thing I came across was actually also, so when baby's pito falls off, is taking that and treating it with the same kind of practice that you might whenua ki te whenua. So our youngest boy, and did we do it? Oh, we did it with the girls, but in different places. Our youngest boy, his pito's up on whare puhunga, in a rākau up on whare puhunga. But, you know, even thinking about, where will we bury the whenua? Where will we take the pito? It's again, I use this word, but it's a catalyst for many whānau to go, kei te rā hononga. Where do we want to, you know, really whakatō te wairua o tēnei pepe? And I think that's the important thing as well with these concepts, that they tie us to whenua. They help us to reconnect to whenua if we're not already connected. And there's so many layers to that, you know, having a ngahere. I often think, what would have our traditional whare kohanga have looked like? Where would they have been and what would they have looked like? And, you know, interestingly enough, there is one tiny little reference in kōrero about whare kohanga that says, also known as whare kahu, whare puhunga.
Nera. Wow.
And so there's all the, and I've got it and I cannot find anything else e pāna ki tērā kōrero. So I don't know if this is...
He tīmatatanga pai
but yeah,
tērā.
he wānanga nō tēnei. And so when I saw that, this was in my PhD, I was like, what would whare kohanga have been? Other names, whare kahu, all these different ingoa. And then, just this one little reference was like, I've also seen it referred to as whare puhunga. I think it was in Whaia Aroha Yates Smith's work.
Well, pai tērā i te whakaroho, you know, as I was listening to you, we just come from Tangihanga, but I couldn't help but see so much similarities in the whole process, you know, with the whakawhānau tamariki and, you know, the birthing process and it being, you know, a full cycle right all the way into our burial processes. So we need to speak about whare puhunga and our understanding, you know, ko te whare puhunga tangatera o kahu. Maybe she was entering the last phases or, you know, that rebirth phase that she was going through. But I find that so interesting. I guess my pātai is, have you found in your researches similarities between birthing practices and end-of-life practices?
Oh, interesting that you should kind of raise that. I haven't specifically looked at that myself, except that kōrero of te kore te pō and te ao marama has come through really strongly across quite a lot of the people that I've spoken to in the work that I've done, that you know, that is a really important process for life and death, and we need to really understand and respect that movement between those different processes, and even for things then like mental health, you know, if we sit in the space of te pō for too long, like how do we move ourselves back into te ao marama? So I think that cycle, that journey is actually really important across the life course. But I do know that there are a couple of kairanga hou, one wahine that I'm on her advisory panel who's looking specifically at that connection between, you know, life and birth and, you know,
and mate.
te wao te mate. So no, I don't.
Ai pai ana?
I think there's
I just
lots.
thought in your little whare puhunga, little gold, little bit of gem that you found, there might be something in there.
I think that was, you know, when I did my research, I found so many little gems, and it now feels like it's a life's worth of work. You know, and I found a lot of them towards the end of my PhD, and my supervisors were like, nope, you can't look at that. Like, you have to finish this thing or you're going to be here forever. So I was like, okay. So I finished my PhD talking about never-ending beginnings. And this is the whole thing about birth. This is they're never-ending beginnings. We're always going to bring life into the world. And And so I kind of have used that as, okay, this isn't something you can finish in a 3 or 4 year piece of research. These are lifelong wānanga, and I think, you know, they're also wānanga that we need to have collectively, not in a, like, one person trying to find it all out on their own. They need to be wānanga, you know, in the fullest sense of the term.
Have you seen a shift in the role that papa play when it comes to whakawhānau pepe? Because I do know in my dad's time it was quite common for them to go to the pub or sit outside and, you know, that wahine with the midwives and wahine were in that space. But like with my tāne, he delivered our baby, you know, and I know a couple of my bros, you know, they did the same thing too. I pērā hoki, kōrua ko tō makau?
Yeah, there's definitely been a shift. I think, you know, there's now, as we reclaim more of our mātauranga, I think also that opens up a space and role for our papa, for our koros, for all of our, you know, uncles, for our tāne in this space that, you know, well, I can't, you know, because sometimes they feel a bit helpless, because it's hard.
Well, it is a bit helpless, but I think part of it is the kōrero's not ever made Māori, you know, it's not ever made natural to speak about things until, you know, recently when kia au nei ko te tohu o ngā tāne who are really in tune, tāne who are raised by their kuia, their mums, who aren't afraid to talk about ikure ma te wahine, you know, all of the things that happen with the wahine's body. Kei reira ke te āhuatanga o ngā tāne e whai wahi atu ana ki nei kaupapa. So I think, have you, I mean, observed change?
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely seen change. I think we have much more support for our tāne to engage in hapu wānanga. You know, hapu wānanga are incredible spaces that have, you know, just taken off in the last 10 years.
Ooh, how have those hapu wānanga given purpose to our tāne? Actually, that might be the pātai, you know?
I think because, you know, as opposed to antenatal classes were very much about mum and baby. And even the term midwife is about being with women.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas if we talk about kai whakawhānau, like we're talking about te katoa o te whānau. And so when we think about hapu wānanga, they're designed around whānau. And yes, mum's important, like she plays a pivotal role, but actually they're designed around supporting all of our whānau, whatever constellations of whānau look like. So it might not be mum and dad, it might be mum and mum, or dad and mum, or, you know, like there are so many beautiful constellations that make up our whānau, but they have space for our tāne, for our wider whānau. And I think things like ori, you know, that dad can learn. And
Miri ngā kuwha.
There's, you know, there's so many things in our tikanga now. One of our, for my whānau, and this was just something I decided, you know, because you can when you're hapu, but it was that actually it's dad's job to get the whenua in the ground as soon as possible. So for all of our babies, the very next day, dad has taken the whenua home. And, you know, we were kind of lucky that we lived nearby, but that was their job.
Tino,
Because actually I didn't really want to travel and I didn't need to be part of that. So that was kind of their role for our whānau. So I think finding those things that our tāne can support with, that they can learn, that they can take.
We're simple creatures, man. We just need to be told what to do.
But even, you know, acknowledging that our babies will find roles for them. You know, they'll birth to their dad.
Yeah.
And I remember my midwife, she was an amazing midwife, and she, you know, as soon as she knew baby was coming, she's like, how do I...
Anna.
Here, Dad. You know, she wasn't trying to be in the way. No. And so all of that, I think, is how do we create support around our whānau so that they can do the important work of birthing the baby.
Tika tērā pai, tērā ko au te mea I hau te haipapa o te deliver I aku taina I te wawa, and at that time that would have been, like, thinking retrospectively, I was thinking, that would have been weird in that society, you know, but thinking about that mahi then is kind of gave me connections to my siblings and to mum and dad, you know, that I would never had otherwise, and it was only because of our understanding of tikanga, or our wanting to be connected to familial tikanga, you know, one that's all-inclusive.
Oi, a tāhua tērā. And growing up, it was, because Mum was a midwife and there's a million of us, by the time our younger siblings came, the older siblings had an opportunity to birth them. So then when we had our own tamariki, it was very much normal. But even when my sister had her baby, getting her boy in, and he's like 5 years old, and his hands are down there in the water, just waiting for his taina to come and to greet him and to do karake, and fostering that at a really young age. You know, we had to learn that as pakeke, but now we have the ability to ensure that our tamariki and our iramutu, that they know that. So when they become papa or mama, that they have the confidence and they know how to set those intentions. So, yeah, he a tāhua. It's a beautiful
Tino a
thing, eh?
tāhua.
Yeah.
Right. You know, it's bizarre that we had this whole other world view that was like you have to be on your own, on your back, in a room with a strange doctor.
Yeah.
And that was
In a hospital.
Yeah. Away from
Fully
whānau
numb.
for quite a long period of time.
Yeah.
You know, and when you look at it, like when you look at that, and that was not a long time ago, like, you know, in terms of our worlds, and then you look at those transformations around, you know, having whānau in the room, having many generations in the room, that our babies grow up knowing this is a normal but sacred part of our life. Like, a tāhua rawatu.
And there's been a few reports come out, you know, when we talk about the state of maternal mental health in Aotearoa. It's not good. It's not good. I don't want to share those stats, but for wahine Māori, kei raro tātou e putu ana when we are carrying our pepe in 6 weeks after giving birth. Just our mental health is not where it should be. And all these reports are saying that kaupapa Māori, that tikanga Māori in these spaces is the rongoa to support our mama. And so even I'm seeing with a lot of these hapūtanga wānanga that they're not just for Māori, it's getting to a point where we're inviting tauiwi, tangata tiriti into these space, because what's good for Māori
It's good for everyone,
good
right?
for everybody.
We've been preaching that for a long time.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I think one of the key parts to this, and this is something I'm really interested in and is a kind of area that I would love to do more rangahau on, is that postnatal period. You know, in mainstream health, they're like 6 weeks postnatal, but actually our tinana take 2 years to heal. And I've been looking at a whole lot of kōrero from other iwi taketake around the world, and they have the most amazing tikanga postnatally for mama and baby. So, you know, we talk about tohi and the tua, the naming rituals, but in other places around the world, there's really specific tikanga around kai. What kind of kai we feed mama to help with her healing, what kind of rongoa she gets, miri. There's tikanga around, in some cultures, mama doesn't cook for a certain period of time. And so I'm really interested to know, because I think one of the risks that we have is that we treat having pepe as really normal, which it is, but it's also really sacred. And so if we think about it as normal without sacred, then we risk saying, oh, yep, you've had a baby, come on, carry on. You know, time to carry on with it. And we actually, in our society, praise mums who are back at work or who are back out at kaupapa and back doing a whole lot of stuff. If they want to, you know, like I think I would have not coped being stuck at home for a long time. But actually, what are our tikanga around ensuring mum is well supported, her tinana can heal, her wairua can kind of come back and stitch itself together. You know, these are big transformations, and that she has time with pepe and with her whānau to adjust to what that means.
Somebody actually asked me that question because her tāne's from Malaysia, and saying some of the tikanga they had was they would feed you very specific kai that aided in the healing of your tinana. They didn't cook kai. You were like served. You were just treated like a queen for quite a long time until your body had fully healed. And they had, and this was ancient knowledge. And she said, oh, what do we do as Māori? You must know. Your mum's a midwife. And I said, oh, well, ko whakarauora e te o ngā kōrero mo te whakawhānau pepe, but that's a great question postpartum. What did we do? Because I don't think we would have just gone back out into the matter and...
Kore, well, maybe koina e tahi kura huna e tai ai te hunga whakarongo te rangahau. Hei, whāngai hoki ki tēnei ki te kōrero. Hei, whakakapi ngā kōrero tuahine pēr. What are some thoughts that you might, or some words of encouragement, or some kupu that you might have for our kai whakarongo? You know, some of those who might be asking, how do I get access to this kōrero, to this wānanga, to this mātauranga that these guys are talking about?
I think we're really fortunate now is that there are lots of people working in kaupapa Māori ways, in mātauranga Māori spaces around whakawhānau pipi, around te whare tangata. And so there are increasingly more and more resources online, puka, ngā Huia Murphy's work. You know, there's a whole body of work. And we're really fortunate that we have a growing Māori midwifery, you know, amazing wahine. We have wahine who are having, you know, have midwifery units that, you know, are specifically for whānau Māori. We have hapu wānanga. So there is places we can access, but I think ask the questions, do what you can. Like, don't put so much pressure on yourself that you need to have it all figured out all of the time. And trust your tinana. I think that's the other thing. Trust your tinana as a wahine, trust your tinana as a papa, trust your pepe and your role in that. And, you know, build the village, I think is really important. Like, don't leave this work to mum. Like, if you're listening and you're not a mama, but you've got someone in your world, like, what can you do? Like, it might be kai. Like, I can cook. I'm a cook. Awesome healing kai. It might be taonga pūr or, you know, whatever, cleaning, but what can you do to be part of that? So mum can focus on that most important job.
Pai, ka mātua pia I e nā kōrero.
Ana, me toki whakai nui ki o kōrero. Tēnā rawa atu koe maui whai wahi mai ki tēnei kaupapa nui whakaharahara. Hei aha, hei tautoko. He whakarauara I enei tikanga kia painga I te horapa whānui o enei kurahuna o enei mātauranga ki ngā tōpito katoa o te motu. Tēnā rawa atu koe e te wahine katoa rehe. Kia ora.